So let me share my screen. I'll just um, explain you the workflow once again, just to be sure that we are on the same page. Okay, because it's very lengthy topic and we might be confused as well. Okay, so the scenario is simple, right? We wanted to set up the virtual desktop sessions, right? Because since everybody is working from home, we wanted to connect to the work securely, right? So, and most of the organizations would like to save the cost as well. That's another aspect. So users can use their personal laptop to connect to the virtual desktop, and they'll get a desktop session where they can launch the Office, MS Office and Word, Excel, and they can open their Office related stuff. Okay. So the communication that is happening from their personal laptop to the virtual desktop is secured, and users can only copy the text files, text data. They cannot copy a Word file or Excel file, anything from the local desktop to the virtual desktop session, and from virtual desktop session to the local desktop. So that's how you can say the data is secured, right? So to set up that, okay, we need to understand how is our current setup, how is our environment looks like, right? What I'm saying is I have my existing on-premise infrastructure. My users are located in the on-prem, okay? So I'm managing the security or identity part with the help of native Windows core components, Windows Server core components. That is the Active Directory domain services. The server which holds this role, we call it as a domain controller. Okay. Basically, what does Active Directory domain services does is it establishes a domain. So whatever the domain you are logging in, entitydata.com, wipro.com, contest.com, they are the domains, right? So you have the domain created internally for your corporate environment, and that will be linked to your domain provider, like GoDaddy, anything, right? So in short, you have this domain controller configured by your IT team, and any user that they join in the organization, they'll get a user ID and password. Okay. So all the application this user need to access, okay, the application will be granted. I mean, so the user will be granted access to those applications. So you have app one, app two, app three. Maybe you have RDP access to few servers, right? Some of the applications have access, let's say some of the websites, internal websites, right? So these applications and these things, right? Whenever a user is trying to access to these applications or through RDP or through websites, maybe this the applications are aware that whenever a user is trying to connect to this application, this knows that okay, I need to go to this ADDS database and ask whether this is the valid user or not. This guy will validate, okay, this guy exists at contest.com is my directory. Okay, this guy exists, I can allow the access to this, it will grant a token, so that user will get access to the application or RDP or whatever, right? Websites or anything. So this is the current setup. Okay. What does the user do? User log into your corporate office. You have given a laptop or desktop, right? So he connect to the corporate network. The corporate network is secured with the CD because nobody else log into this network. Only the user who has account in this will be able to access this network, right? And this is the intra network within the network, right? So user wanted to connect from externally, so they usually connect to a VPN, right? There will be a VPN in place, VPN network policy server, and there is a big setup that your organization manages. So user will be able to connect to this through a private network. Okay, this is one kind of setup. Okay, so and even some customers, what they do, they don't want to give a desktop, they don't want to give a laptop, they wanted to give some thin clients. So which is cheaper and which runs on Android version. So what they do is they don't want to, you know, give the desktops. The user will log into this Android thing client. Then they log into Citrix URL. There will be something called Citrix. In the Citrix, your team will publish the desktops and applications. The user just launch the Citrix URL. Once he launch the Citrix URL, you get all desktops and applications access. The user will just launch it, and when they launch it, it will ask for the authentication. The authentication goes to ADDS, and the user get applications and OTP, whatever I've explained. This is another method, right? When a user is trying to connect from the desktop from home, right, they can get the same app URL, okay? Then they try to log in and they get the same thing. Here, what you need to set up is you need to set up the infrastructure where you manage the Citrix server and Citrix applications and everything. I mean, the whatever the virtual setup that we are doing for your end customer and users, you have to manage the big infrastructure. Okay, since everybody is moving to the cloud, now you have everything in the cloud, right? So now since you have everything in the cloud, so you wanted to have your users to access the cloud application seamlessly. Okay, what's happening is you have multiple applications here and you are using one user ID password to access multiple applications because you might have some single sign-on servers configured like ADFS or Ping Federate, something you configured where your application has some integration some way. Right? When you user is log into the laptop, right? He enter user ID password, then whatever the applications he logging in, he get a single sign on. No need to enter the user ID password. Sometimes he has to enter the user ID password, which is like same user ID and password, right? So same user ID password he has to give, right? That is called same sign on. Sometimes you have to remember multiple user IDs and passwords, right? So that is not a single sign-on, not the same sign-on, right? When it goes to the cloud, if this user wanted to access to multiple cloud applications, have app one, you have app two, app three, which are integrated with your Azure Active Directory. Okay, basically Azure Active Directory, what it does is it integrate with the multiple applications and it provides a single sign-on or authentication. 1 minute. Yeah, so I'm back. So
So,
what has hmm,
on on-prem, user ID and passwords are stored in ADDS.
yes, yes, that's right. Everything in AD. No, there is no cloud here. This is
No, right.
on-prem.
So the user ID and password are stored in Active Directory.
Yes, that is the purpose of Active Directory. Even your user ID password is stored in your corporate directory, ADDS.
Hmm.
Whenever you log into your laptop, the laptop will you enter user ID password, right? That authentication will be happen through this ADDS. So it reaches to the ADDS database and it authenticates. Not laptop. Maybe if you have access any application in your laptop, right? So that's how it works.
Right. I
Mm.
mean, to your point, at times it doesn't ask password. At times it's asked for
Right,
passwords.
because it has two things. One is a same sign-on and single sign-on. So when I say same sign-on, your multiple applications, you have to enter the user ID password every time, okay? But you're entering the same user ID password. That is same sign-on. That is also in short people call as a SSO. There is something called single sign-on. Once you log into your laptop, you don't enter user ID password to access any applications or any websites, right? So we don't enter the user ID password. So it automatically takes care. That is single sign-on. That single sign-on happens with some other different components. There is a big infrastructure that is being set up to handle the single sign-on process. It cannot be just happens. You have application. That application should share the identity to some other component, like we have Active Directory
Mhm.
Federation Services, Ping Federate, some other companies who provide the federation services. It's a different concept together. Okay. So what I
Okay.
wanted to say is, since everybody is moving to the cloud, what is a relevant component which can replace this ADDS? Okay. So just thinking about it, right? We have something called AAD, Azure Active Directory. Azure Active Directory does the authentication authorization, same as your ADDS. Okay, here we say AADDS. Okay, AADS, Azure Active Directory. Okay, this is AAD. This is AAD, Azure Active Directory. This is AD. Okay, AD AAD. Okay, so
Right.
here also it does the user ID password authentication. Also it does the user ID password authentication. Okay, both are matching. So here it stores user IDs and passwords. Here also we have the capabilities of storing user ID password. Okay. The way user ID and getting created here different. The way user ID gets created here is different. Because when you have a ADDS, okay, you get a domain call, let's say contoso.com. Okay. But here you get a domain call contoso.onmicrosoft.com because it is on Azure, on Microsoft directories, right? Here you have to maintain your ADDS server, and you have to have a primary domain controller and a secondary domain controller just in case if primary goes down. It's a very big infrastructure you maintain. If somebody hit into this, like any hacker, anything, entire organization will be down. So here you don't need to manage any server. It's a PaaS component, PaaS offering. Microsoft manages the underlying server infrastructure for you. Okay, you
Mhm.
don't need to worry about it. What you need to do is you create user accounts here. Okay, you create user accounts. Okay, you can create groups. You can add users to the groups, like multiple users if they have similar role. If they are going to perform the same operation, you can create a groups. We call it as a distribution groups, DLs, right? And we also have email enabled groups. Okay, so these are the groups and all. And what do you do with these accounts and groups, right? See, I'm creating user accounts here for my new joiners because they have to access, they have to do something for our organization. There are a few applications that they manages it, right? Now, right? So to access that application, I'm giving an employment and I'm giving a user ID password and they do it. When it comes to the cloud, what do they do actually? Okay, so Azure Active Directory support multiple applications. Okay, there are like multiple applications where you can have a integration with the Azure AD. Okay, so let's say here you have app 1, app 2, app 3 and all, right? So those apps are available in Azure AD Marketplace. Okay, we say gallery, Azure AD gallery. What you need to do is you can just integrate or add those with the Azure Active Directory. Once we add them to Azure AD, right? Let's say Facebook is an application. Maybe I'm developing a Facebook application. That application currently most of the users are purchasing from me. Okay, in the on-prem world. So since everybody is moving to the cloud, I wanted to give the visibility to all the cloud users. What I do, there is a process that I have to follow to move my Facebook application to Azure AD Gallery. So I follow the process and I get certified from Microsoft. I move the application to Azure AD Gallery. So Rakesh is a customer. He come to the Azure AD Gallery. He see, hey, Facebook is available. Okay, let me integrate that with my Azure AD tenant. Once I integrate, I can add my users to this group. I can add the list of users who are part of this deal, right? They will get access to this application, right? Now, how the user get access to this application? You added application, right? But how does the user get access to the application? Let's say to access the application, user try to go for facebook.com, right? That is how they do it. So user is going to say, what is the end username? It is going to be Kamal at contoso.onmicrosoft.com. on Microsoft.com. These are cloud only users. Okay, I have not integrated a sync or have a hybrid deployment from on-prem to Azure. I have not done yet. Okay, I've created a cloud users and I have applications that are integrated with Azure AD. Okay, and I've added this user to this application, Facebook application. Now this user goes to facebook.com. Since facebook.com has an integration with this directory, okay, so this Facebook has information about this UPN suffix, right? Okay, contoso.onmicrosoft.com is belongs to this directory. Okay, let me go to this Azure Active Directory and ask for the authentication. Hey, Kamal is reaching to me to access the Facebook application. Is he a valid user or not? Is he part of this application or not? So Azure already validates that. It will say, hey, this is a valid user. You give access to him, right? So Kamal can access the Facebook application, right? Likewise, you have hundreds of applications, thousands of applications, right? Your user can use this user ID password, the Azure AD password to access multiple applications with the same sign-on. Or if your Facebook application supports a single sign-on method, Azure AD also supports a single sign-on configuration, right? You don't need to maintain the federation services. You don't need to go for ping federate, a lot of things. Azure already manages the single sign-on as well. User, once he log into, let's say there is something called my apps dot, okay, microsoft.com. Your Kamal can log into this URL. Once he log into this URL, he will see list of application he got access, app one, app two, app so and so on, right? There are like 100 applications. Kamal just need to click on the application icon. It will redirect to the URL. Let's say Facebook. Let's say Twitter application. Let's say something else, HR application. It will give you the single sign-on or same sign-on, depends on the application. If the application supports a single sign-on and you integrated that with the Azure AD and configure the single sign-on steps, right? Kamal can directly click on that application and the application launches the required information. So user don't need to Kamal don't need to provide in credentials of Twitter or let's say Facebook again and again. You just need to log into this URL at one time. That's it. Nothing else to be done. Okay. So that is the use of Azure Active Directory. You are going to give access to multiple applications, and applications can support same sign-on and single sign-on methods, right? It all depends on the application and business use cases. You integrate them, and your users get access to it, right? So in short, Azure AD takes care of authentication, authorization of the uh, users logins, right? So that's how it works.
Mm.
Okay, this is one part of it. What
Okay.
else
So,
Azure AD can do? Yeah, go ahead.
when you add the user the first time, right? For example, this ID Kamal at contest on Microsoft.com, right? So they'll get an entry into AD, right?
There is no AD concept here. I'm not integrating them. Okay.
No, AAD,
Oh,
Azure AD.
AAD. Yes, yes. They will be created in
Yeah.
AAD.
So
You are
we
creating an
will
AAD
will
itself.
yeah. So we'll have an entry created in AAD, Azure AD, right?
Right.
Now, um, how do we define or where it is defined that this user is going to have access to only selected applications,
Yeah. So
not
if you go to
all?
once user account is created, if you go to user, right, you have a
Hmm.
applications option, right? You can see list of applications he has access. Okay. Otherwise, you can go to Azure AD and applications blade. You will see list of applications that are integrated with AAD. You can add the users to specific applications alone, right? You have more control on that. Okay.
Okay.
Clear?
I think probably I can make it clear, Kamal. See, what I believe is for any tenant or any subscription, no matter you have access to local server, your like local admin or whatever it is, it's a simple scenario. If you have access to a server as a local admin, you won't be able to access unless you have AD Azure account, Azure AD account. Yeah. So AD Azure account is where it defines as to know what all privileges you have, and then subsequently, once you log on, then it will go and integrate. Is that right, Kamal?
I lost you actually. Can you repeat?
See, for any tenant, any Azure tenant or any subscriptions what we have, even though we have access on the server. So, for example, you have a tenant and then you have subscriptions and then you have few servers there. So, if an administrator gives you access on those servers, still you won't be able to access because you need to have access first on Azure AD. So, once you have Azure AD account, that's when it can, walk you through as to where you can access all what all privileges you have, and that's how the authentication goes through.
Yeah, that's right. So when you add user account and subscription, right? So initially the accounts get created in IAD. Okay.
Yeah, yeah,
Then it will give a grant access to any application. That is where. See, either you create account first in Azure AD, then it is up to you what you want to perform. As I mentioned, application access is one of the piece. Okay. The other piece is Azure AD also manages the authentication for subscription, Azure subscription. It also manages the authentication for Office 365. Okay. So you create user accounts here. Later you add them to subscription, you add them to Office 365, or you add them to applications.
yes,
Right. So just like we added the user to a subscription with a defined role, right? With
Right, right.
Azure defined roles.
No, no. The
Likewise,
roles
you're
are
saying,
different again. Okay. The roles are different again. Okay. Let
okay,
me again just add some more points here. Okay. When I say adding to the application, right? In the application, if the application has more control on what kind of permissions we can give to the user, let's say user can only log in, user can modify something, right? Right. So those things in application level. Okay. I- if you want somebody to add a new user to the AAD, okay, and if you want somebody to delete some users in AAD, if you want somebody to integrate an application with the AAD, those permissions are different. This is Azure AD administration permissions. Okay,
great. For,
those
for
are,
that, you need the admin permissions,
yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah. Let me just complete that.
Sure, sure.
So Azure AD permissions are different. What permission? Let's say if I wanted to add a user, maybe I need to have a user administrator role in AAD itself because AAD has a different permissions. If I wanted to reset password for a user, maybe user administrator is fine. If I wanted to delete a global administrator, I should be a global administrator, right? So if you wanted to have more privileges to manage the Azure AD, you need to have a global administrator permission. Okay, that is AAD permissions. Now, if you wanted to create a VMN subscription, right? So you should go with the subscription per RBAC permissions, owner, contributor, or reader. Okay, is it clear now? Are we on the same page, Rakesh?
Yeah, yeah. Come on.
It is
That's
clear,
clear.
right? Okay. So, so this is about the application integrations and providing access to different cloud services like Office 365, Azure subscription. So this is how we add the, integrate. So there are two different things, right? AD is different, Azure AD different. But in AD, we have some other capabilities. Okay. So if I wanted to control the security for my users, right? Let's say I don't want my users to right click on their desktop. I don't want them to change the font size. I don't want them to insert a USB cable, right? There are like multiple options. I can control them using the group policies. Okay. And there is something called Kerberos authentication where and LDAP. So these are like your application uses. These are the benefits or features of Active Directory. But when it goes to the Azure Active Directory, you don't have such capabilities. Okay, if a user in the on-prem, if a user come to your corporate network, right, it is your local network, user connect to the Wi-Fi and you just log into a laptop using user ID password of your on-prem ID. When it comes to the cloud, you're coming from either a home office or maybe you have on-prem world, whatever it is, right? When you try to log in, you have to use just command at Microsoft.com, and if you wanted to connect to this computer should connect to the internet. Okay, because the authentication happens online, though there are local credentials and all, local cache and all, right? So that's how when you log into this, right, with the contest dot on Microsoft.com, then you get all single sign-on features, etc. Okay. Otherwise, you have to log in with your normal user account in your laptop, and later you have to log into all the applications with this. It does not have the same capabilities as your on-premises AD. So to
So
have
how do we?
similar.
Uh,
Mhm.
okay, I think you are
Yeah,
about
go
to
ahead.
cover that, right? So
Go ahead. Go
now,
ahead.
how do we apply those restrictions? I mean, the one that do it using group policies on
Right. Right.
on-prem. How do we
Right.
do it here using Azure policy?
Yeah. So Azure policy is different. Again, it is part of Azure
Okay.
subscription alone, right? It's Azure policy is one of the service that Microsoft is offering to Azure customers to manage their infrastructure. But what we are talking is, we are talking about Azure AD authentication. Okay. If it is a Azure policy, let's say I have a Azure VM where I have a domain controller configured. I wanted to apply some policies on the VM, not inside the operating system. Okay. The policy will only apply in a subscription level. Let's say I don't want a user to deploy a VM in a specific location. They are like how you manages the deployments and kind of stuff that will
Hmm.
not do anything in the operating system. It will not go
So
inside the operating system and apply some restrictions. Okay.
machine level restrictions you cannot put it through
Yeah,
Azure
I would
policy.
say OS level in simple terms,
OS
right?
level.
OS level you cannot control with the Azure policies. Everything that you do is based on the fabric or platform level. Okay. When it comes to the similar restriction, Microsoft later introduced something called AADDS, Azure Active Directory Domain Services, AADDS. So with the AADDS, what do you do is you create the service. When you're getting the service, it is going to create a VNet. You need to have a VNet in place, and there will be a subnet created. Okay, and when this same domain, contour dot on Microsoft.com will have the same domain, right? You're going to have a domain controller created, and this domain controller is being managed by Microsoft. Okay, and this will be part of a VNet, and you will not take RDP to this. You cannot take RDP to this AADDS VM, which is managed by Microsoft. You cannot take RDP. What all you can do is you can create another subnet. Okay, you can have your new VMs joined to this domain, and if you have a end user who wanted to connect to this domain, you need to set up the point to set VPN or VPN. Then your user will be connected to this network, and this laptop can join to this Azure domain services to get a group policy capabilities and Kerberos capabilities and all these LDAP capabilities. Okay, only thing what you are eliminating is the domain controller management, right? Like creating a domain controller and managing the additional DC and all those things are being taken care of by Microsoft. You just only join your VMs to the domain or join your users to the domain with the VPN. They all connect through internet. Okay, just in case if you have on-prem environment, right? So you can just have a site-to-site VPN to this, and join the servers to the domain, join the VM laptops to the domain. It's kind of hectic process. Okay, right? Either you can go with this approach. If you wanted to have only cloud only users, just eliminate all these on-prem environment. You have a user account, user's laptop, join to this, connect to this VNet through VPN, and join this laptop to this domain, so that they get same capabilities of on-prem AD. Okay, and you don't need to manage the domain controller or an ADDS. Everything is being managed by Microsoft. You get the same console as what you see here to manage user accounts here. Everything is same. Only thing is you don't get RDP to this ADDS, okay, server, and right, and you don't need to manage it. Okay, the challenge will be you need to have a gateway created to connect a point-to-site VPN. Every user should connect through VPN, right? And you can have your another infrastructure setup, let's say your file servers, app server, whatever it is, right? You can build a big environment here, and all the servers will be joined to this domain. Authentication, authorization, everything is managed by ADDS. Okay, I have not seen, not implemented in my experience so far. I did the labs, okay, but I don't see that much success in this. Even very less customers may be, right. Startup kind of customers might be using this, but I don't see anybody is implementing, because 99% of the customers are in this world, on-prem world, and with the Microsoft products, and they are with the ADDS component. Their application, like legacy applications, are integrated with this ADDS. So what they want to do is don't wanted to apply this ADDS, but they still wanted to use the cloud features like Active Directory, Azure Active Directory. They still wanted to use these features, but they don't wanted to use this ADDS for authentication of authorization, or Kerberos LDAP features for their applications and their users. They still wanted to have on-prem environment, and they wanted to again use the cloud directory as well. So that is why what they have done is they are integrating their on-premises environment with the Azure Active Directory. Okay, so this is kind of a hybrid deployment. Okay, so when I say hybrid deployment, your users are sourced from on-premises AD. Okay, they are from on-prem AD. The user accounts, groups, everything is created on-prem AD. They have access to multiple application. They use the same user ID to connect to application. They do the work. At the same time, they are very much interested in the cloud applications, right? In Azure AD Gallery, they integrate cloud applications to Azure AD, and they want their users to use same user ID password of on-premises to access the cloud applications. Let's say Kamal at counterser.com, right? This is the ID, right? They want their users to use this to connect to cloud applications. So with this synchronization process, we should be able to connect from on-prem AD to Azure AD. Sorry.
Yeah, we
So
got it.
can you hear me now?
Yes, yes.
Okay. So for this hybrid deployment, what we do is, I mean, it is simple. It's not only the cloud applications access. You can give access to subscriptions. You can give access to Office 365. Whatever the capabilities that cloud only users had, similar capabilities that on-prem user can get it. Okay, and they can use the same user ID password to log in. Okay, that's the beauty of it. Your user don't need to remember one password for on-prem applications, one password for cloud application. That is eliminated. So we need to establish this hybrid environment so that they can access to it. To establish this hybrid environment, what we need is we need a dedicated server. We need a separate server, or maybe we can have the tool installed in the domain controller itself. The tool name is Azure AD Connect. Okay, so this tool has to be installed in your domain controller. Okay, and once you install it, you need to establish a connection from your on-prem AD to Azure AD. Okay. So on-prem AD, you need to give your domain admin credentials to authenticate, and Azure AD, you have to give Azure AD global administrator credentials so that the trust can be established. And we can have some other configuration while installing. Maybe we'll see all these options. Okay. So once we establish the user account, whatever you create in ADDS, they will be available in Azure AD. Later, I can give them access to cloud application. I can give access to subscription. I can give access to Office 365. In our scenario, what we are going to do is we are going to implement the WVD, right? Windows Virtual Desktop, right? In Windows Virtual Desktop, what I'm doing is I have the domain controller here and I'm synchronizing the users here. This on-prem domain has contoso.com. So I wanted to use the same in Azure AD as well. What I have done is contoso.com I purchased from GoDaddy. I verified this with the Azure AD so that my users can be visible, or they can authenticate through publicly as well. So the next step what I'm going to do is I'm going to integrate this WVD service with the Azure AD. Okay. So that WVD, once I create WVD service, right? WVD service can read the users from Azure AD. Okay. WVD is part of subscription. Okay. Azure subscription. This is one of the service that Microsoft is offering. Okay. So first thing what I need to do, I need to give WVD access to Azure AD to fetch the user accounts, fetch the groups. That's the first step. The second thing is I need to create a RDS tenant, remote desktop service. WVD is one of the remote desktop service, right? So I need to create a RDS tenant. Okay. But to create a RDS tenant, I need to, first of all, I need to provide permissions to create this RDS tenant. So there is something called tenant group, or I would say RDS tenant role. Okay, a tenant contributor role. So when you integrate this WVD, or when you give access WVD to Azure AD, you have the application that is available under the application gallery. You have to go to the application and there is something called tenant role. You have to give access to one of the existing user in Azure AD so that we can use that user account to create a RDS tenant. Basically, what I'm doing is I'm integrating this WVD applications to Azure AD, then giving one of the user with the more privileges so that this application create a tenant for me. Okay. Once I create a tenant, then I will go to WVD services, create a new WVD tenant so that while creating a WVD tenant, I'm going to specify how many virtual machines I need to give to my users and how I need to load balance the user's request to this, right? They will be load balanced if one server is not available, other server will be given access to the end user. It is automatically, you will see all the options while creating this WVD setup. Okay. So I will set up this WVD. Okay. Once I set up the WVD, and I can go to WVD service, add users to the WVD, add groups to the WVD session desktop, so that users can, whoever is part of this WVD service, they can take remote session for it. Okay. While configuring, you will see more options. If I explain, I think you will be confused a lot. Okay. This part, this entire integration, we'll be speaking in the next session. Okay. What we'll do is we'll install the Azure AD Connect. We already enabled domain control yesterday, right? We'll install the Azure AD Connect and we will enable the hybrid deployment. Once we enable the hybrid deployment, we'll explain few properties of Azure AD. Then we'll perform this integration of WVD application and providing the specific role to a users, then creating a tenant using PowerShell script. Then we'll create a WVD service. While creating WVD service, you will see a lot of other options. We'll talk in detail in next session. Okay. At least you got some clarity about what is Azure AD, guys.
Yeah, Kamran. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, come on. So
So go ahead.
when you sync the users from on-prem to cloud, right, using AD Connect,
Hmm.
that means you're not going to add any user on the cloud
Yes,
alone, right? You're not
yes,
going to. I mean, the only way you'll be bringing the users is going to be through AD Connect Sync,
yes,
right?
yes. All the users shall be created, but they will create one or two users in Azure AD because we need to authenticate, right? We need one or two global administrators to authentication while installing the Azure AD Connect, while creating this RDS tenant, right? Only one or two, but eventually the on-prem AD users are the ones who are going to be the consumers of this service, right? Since we don't have
Okay.
any data center and all, I'm going to use Azure itself. In Azure, I'll create one VNet. There, I'm going to enable, virtual machine. I'll create virtual machine where we already enabled domain control, right? There is something more to discuss. It is not that easy to set up this WVD. There is something more to discuss. We need to integrate this WVD with this on-prem AD as well. So there is some more concept to be discussed. We'll start with it tomorrow. Then we'll go for the implementation. Okay.
Okay.
We'll try to draw something which can easily understand maybe after tomorrow session. You will see the entire end-to-end connectivity. Okay. All right.
Okay.
Kamlakar,
Thanks.
Yeah.
Kamlakar, the videos of the second week, I think you are not uploaded, right?
Let me check. I'll upload it.
Okay. Okay.
I have
Thanks.
very less bandwidth actually now. Came to hometown. Um,
Oh,
so I'll see. I mean, I'll upload for sure
that's
today.
fine. When you have time, yeah. When you
Yeah.
have
Okay.
time and bandwidth, that's fine. Yeah.
Okay. Sure.
Right.
Thank you. It's bye.
Thanks, guys.